Good morning everyone, today we're checking out a brand new video from the Game Theaters about how they may have finally, once and for all, found out the true identity of the player character. Now before we get into this, by this point I have definitely watched someone play Chapter 5, so I know about everything that happens in it, and how some people are struggling with the Lily Lovebraid chase. Which does kind of make sense. It's not as clear as some of the previous chases, which were just, straight hallways. But let's just go ahead and hop into this video and see what they finally figured out. Or even if they figured it out.
Who do we play as in Poppy Playtime? It's a question we've had since day one of the franchise, but as the series slowly heads towards its inevitable end, we're running out of options. So let's take a look at our...
Also, yeah, I finally saw what the prototype's full form looked like. Now I want to know his, full story. Was he originally a Jack-in-the-Box like we saw before, or what people have been theorizing, and he just constructed this body? Or was he actually constructed with the whole spider motif?
Few remaining characters and solve this mystery once and for all. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that knows that for every theory we get right, we often get one wrong. And Poppy Playtime is no exception. There have been three key mysteries plaguing us. I've actually been referring to them internally as the three P's of Poppy. Who is Poppy, who is the prototype, and who is the player? I'm sure
So it'd be Poppy Player Prototype.
He is profoundly pleased, perhaps even palpitating at the plentiful, practically preposterous proliferation of...
Oh my god, I can hear your mic, Poppy. You're doing that on purpose, man.
punchy plosives I'm presently producing. Sorry, bud. Anyway, over the last 5 years, I have tried desperately to answer these three questions.
That's funny.
We nailed pretty early on that Poppy was the daughter of Elliot Ludwig, a prototype we flipped and flopped over the next few years. Although technically, I was more right than I realized in my first episode as host, so long as you ignore the part where I also suggest it might be Rich. But that just leaves us with one mystery left. Who is the player character? This one has been the biggest enigma for me, mostly because we know so little.
We got Poppy, we got the prototype. Last one, the player.
About them. We know that they worked in the factory at some point, but they weren't important enough to be known by Harley Sawyer.
Weirdly enough, I was actually talking with one of my friends about this a few days ago, almost maybe like a week ago or so. And we were kind of theorizing, what if the player character was just another toy? Someone who had their mind erased and had that singular memory of the node and the VHS implanted. It was just some wonky idea he came up with. I don't buy it.
You worked here.
I can't say I remember seeing your face before.
However, despite being an employee, they weren't present during the Hour of Joy. Hence, they're still alive 10 years later and able to receive the note from Poppy telling them their colleagues had survived. Finally, they feel guilty about their involvement in what Playtime Co. did, as seen in their Chapter 3 hallucinations and the message we hear from Poppy when we're dumped into the vat of Poppy gel at the end of Chapter 5.
Your conscience finally getting the better of you.
Hence why they return to Playtime Co. when told that there is someone they can still save. But despite the...
One minor theory I actually have is, what he was saying. At the end of Chapter 5, after we've been stabbed by the prototype, he drops us into a vat of poppy gel. And Gilbert, I think that's how you say his name, does revive us with an electrical shock. But one thing we gotta remember, we were technically killed, we were submerged in poppy gel, and we were revived. The only thing of us that wasn't a part of us already was that old grab pack that we got from the Mega Brawn. So I kind of personally theorize that at the end of this game, when we do finally leave the factory, we're not going to be as human as when we entered. Like, the grab pack is somehow going to either fuse with us into an extra pad of arms, or is somehow going to fuse with our arms. I'm just not sure.
A lack of evidence, I did put
Just
together an answer,
thinking
one
for
that I
fun.
was convinced had to be the right one. My theory was that we were playing as PW, Preston Willard, a scientist from Playtime Co. and the owner of the Orientation Notebook. They fit everything pretty well. Obviously, they worked for Playtime Co. They were involved in the experiments and felt very
That's
distressed
right.
at the concept, and while that means they may have known Harley, it doesn't necessarily mean he knew them. Harley was pretty up himself. I could see him not paying attention to just another scientist with a lack of drive for what they did.
Dude was so far up his own ass, he was having his dinner from last night again. Oh, that's terrible.
But then the Chapter 5 ARG dropped just before the release of the game, and
Now I can be there for you.
yep, PW was turned into a toy by the prototype. This
Oh,
was
that's
supposedly
right.
a blessing because
Forgot
Preston was
about that.
kind to him. But that does mean that PW is kind of out of commission. Even still, I refuse to believe that we are just a random character. Now,
Actually, this model right here, that's actually what my friend is theorizing we as the player actually are. Just this faceless, modelless toy being thing with only one purpose. The memory that was implanted in us.
inevitably, that would just be so
The letter,
unsatisfying and disappointing. You hear that, Bob? It would be so unsatisfying and disappointing. For our story, our dedication, our sacrifices to matter, we need to be someone that we as an audience have some kind of emotional attachment to. Plus, let's be honest, the list of available options is getting smaller and smaller by the chapter. So rather than wait around for the next chapter, or 2, or 12 to tell us who we are,
12.
I wanted to go down the list of suspects, put them up against our criteria, and see who is the most likely to be our player character.
Yeah.
Grab your shiny new pressure hands, theorists, because we're about to put the pressure on these characters to see which one fits that player-sized mold. First
Power
up,
wash.
Stella Graber. Ah,
Really?
Stella. One of the earliest
okay.
characters we were introduced to in this franchise. In fact, she's been referenced in every chapter up until Chapter 5, which felt a little odd to me. Why has this character, who's been so prominent in notes, VHS tapes, and ARGs, suddenly not been mentioned at all in this chapter? Like, guys, we thought she was Poppy after the very first chapter. She was that prominent. Also,
Oh,
I
yeah,
never mentioned
that's
this
right.
in a theory, but I was convinced that Stella was going to be Lily Lovebraids once we saw that Preston got turned into a toy. The line she gave in the trailer,
We're going to have so much fun!
it just sounded like the OG Stella we heard back in Chapter 1, the one who was so excited about the concept of living forever.
Playing
being
with
a
toys
toy.
when I was young was so magical. I could go straight from my bedroom floor to anywhere in the world.
But alas, it was Miss Gracie instead. Stella, great
yeah.
character, but
Oh.
it means that we aren't sure of Stella's fate.
Also, quick question about that TV. It literally has handles on the side. Anyone that played the chapter will tell me, when you're playing as Huggy, can you grab it and rip it off the wall? Because every time I watch someone play the chapter, they never would do that. They'd mess around, break it, all of that. But then they would also never go back to the room to get what was in the vent you uncovered. Ugh, sorry, just minor annoyances. I'm not egging people to do what, never mind, let's just move on.
Which could make her a viable candidate. Think about it. She's one of the major executives at the company, so Mummy's "you work here" line absolutely tracks. A VHS tape in Chapter 4 also shows us that she had knowledge of the experiments.
I felt so badly. I still do. For the ones that go through the testing.
But the big thing is that she
That's-
really did
that's what
care
you
for the
called it?
orphans and the staff. In the Chapter 3 ARG, there's a project report that shows Stella expressing displeasure at the use of catnap in the playcare. And in Chapter 3 itself, we see she's really saddened when a child isn't getting adopted, but instead experimented on. All
Oh,
this came to a head in the
damn.
most recent ARG for Chapter 5. There's an email from Stella to Preston called "End of My Rope," where she
need
says
to
she
talk.
can't take it anymore. Later on, we got video evidence that Preston was involved in the Hour of Joy,
I just couldn't stand by and watch it happen anymore.
which added credence to my theory that Stella was in fact a big part of making the Hour of Joy happen. So she not only would have felt guilty because of the experiments, but she'd also have felt guilty about what happened to the employees afterwards. She didn't want that to happen.
Possibly.
She just wanted the toys and orphans to go free. Feels like pretty good motivational evidence. But motivation or story evidence isn't the be-all and end-all. And there are two things that make it so I don't think it can be Stella. Firstly,
Go on.
Harley. In chapter 4, he says very distinctly that he doesn't recognize the player. But in that same chapter, we hear this line from Leaf.
You know, the project lead, Dr. Sawyer, wasn't sure about giving you that information in the first place.
Harley knew who Stella was. I mean, they were both
damn,
executives of the company. It would be weird for them not to know each other, at least somewhat. But on top of that, Stella would have been...
I mean, it would make sense for Stella to know him, but Leaf was so up his own... You know what? Never mind. I already made the joke.
In the factory to help make the Hour of Joy happen. And one of two things happened to the humans during that time. They were either killed and eaten, or they were turned into toys. Preston was quote-unquote saved by the prototype for helping him, so Stella likely would have received that same fate. That's why there's no more audio of her in Chapter 5. Much like Preston, her story is over. Okay, maybe figuring out who the right character is going to be a little trickier than I first thought. Thankfully, finding a doctor doesn't have to be, thanks to our partner, ZocDoc. While I'm thankful ZocDoc sponsored this episode to help us find a doctor, we need to find out who the player character is, so I guess we should move on to our next option.
Who's up next?
Eddie Ritterman. Eddie has been much of
Eddie.
a slow burn as a character. We saw his name on a single piece of paper in Chapter 2, we heard his voice in the Chapter 4 ARG, and then we saw more of his personality in that same chapter.
I get paid to see that things get done, and this, like everything else, will get done.
So he's clearly evil. But other than that, we don't have much to
Definitely
go
a little
off,
villainous.
which would be perfect for our faceless protagonist. But what's more perfect is what we hear in this audio log between him and Leith from Chapter 5.
At the park,
Renovations are underway. I'll be inspecting the premises next week, 7th to the 12th.
He's
7th
leaving
to
for
the
their
12th?
theme park the day before the Hour of Joy. So Eddie Ritterman has survived, meaning he's able to return to the factory a decade later. He's also one of the executives, so an employee like Mummy said. Much like Stella though,
Right.
Harley likely knew who
Right.
he was. There is a chance
That
he
part.
didn't. In the orientation notebook, Preston writes about how Eddie is a bit of a mystery. Some even question his existence. So it's technically possible that Eddie was so aloof with everyone besides Leith that Harley just never met him face to face. But that feels unlikely. He also doesn't feel
Definitely.
guilty about the experiments or the employees, and that's for damn sure. Not only was he willing to kill that construction worker to make sure the job got done,
Oh,
but in
yeah.
Chapter 5, we
Forgot
get
about
one of
that.
the biggest reveals that explains his motivations. Eddie is sick. A medical note we can find tells us he has Kennedy's disease, a rare neurodegenerative disorder that affects low motor neurons in the spinal cord and brainstem, causing limb weakness and speech issues. The symptoms are apparently getting worse, and so it makes sense that he would be all in on the experiment. They were seeing if they could live forever after all. Suddenly, Eddie's illness isn't so dire. He doesn't feel guilty. He is willing to sacrifice whoever he could to get what he needed.
What
So
would he
a note
become
telling
then?
him other employees were still alive likely doesn't mean much to him, especially when he's got access to the Tokyo factory, which is likely carrying on with the experiments.
Does a Tokyo factory?
A sequel. For the same reasons, I'm also going to rule out Leith Pierre as our playable character, but I wanted to give him an honorable mention anyway. That means we're out of executives, so the Harley comment shouldn't be much of an issue going forward. But it also means there aren't many characters left to choose from, so bear with me with some of these next options.
Alright, well,
Dr. Arkin's daughter. Now I
I'm
know
sorry,
what
who?
you're thinking. Who on earth is Dr. Arkins, let alone her daughter? And you'd be completely justified in wondering.
oh, wait, no, yeah, I remember her now. Oh, in Chapter 5, you can find notes all over the place from a person called Dr. Arkins who has been trying to, see their child, which is their daughter, at the 9th birthday and 10th birthday.
We've never heard of this person before Chapter 5, but the reason I and a few online have pointed them out is because in this chapter we receive not one, not two, but 3 letters addressed to this character. They're all written by Dr. Arkins to her husband David and her daughter Julie. They talk about her experience working in the factory, the scientists she meets, like those from the Young Geniuses program, how she missed her daughter's birthday, and how she was sold a vision intention of putting an end to death, which she then bought because she wanted that for her own daughter. But the final letter tells us that most of these letters never leave the factory, likely because Leaf was paranoid that information about these experiments would get out. But that means Dr. Arkin's daughter would have been left completely in the dark about her mother. All she'd have known is one day a tragedy happened in the factory and all of the employees went missing, including her mother. So if she were to receive a note telling her that employees were still alive, that might mean her mother was still alive. And that feels like pretty strong motivation to go and see. Alongside that, Harley would have literally no idea who she is. And she'd have also not been present for the hour of joy.
But then what about the comment from Mommy Longlegs about her recognizing us and then that we used to work here?
But the reason she wasn't present or recognized is because she's not an employee. There is a world where you could argue maybe she took a spare employee uniform and badge that her mum left behind, so Mummy just thinks she used to work here based on that. But one, that's really speculative, and two, during chapter 3...
I mean, I know Mommy Longlegs can stretch, but that's a stretch.
When we hallucinate thanks to the red smoke, we see a message that says, your presence was demanded 10 years ago and you didn't show up. 8/8/1995. You were supposed to be here. Why weren't you here? The player wasn't just an employee. They were supposed to
that's not the daughter.
Be there for the hour of joy in some way, which only makes sense in a few cases. Either we were an employee that was just meant to be there that day, we were an employee involved in the hour of joy like Preston or Stella, or we were something else that was expected to be there. An escaped toy. If you thought the last one was a bit out of left field, oh boy, just wait till you hear this one. During chapter 5, you can find this note that is a little different from our usual suspects. Rather than a journal entry or a scientific report, this is a handwritten newspaper from the Better Press. This feels like a reference to the Better Place, a location we talked about last time where the prototype has taken all the orphans once he turned them into toys. The paper itself seems to align with this fact. It talks about a defecting group of 23 toys, the Joyless, who were being led by someone called Gentle John, and about how they were supposed to fight during the hour of joy, but didn't, and instead looked to escape the factory. According to the paper, that didn't happen, and they ended up burning. However, someone has written on the paper the words, how convenient. Like, it's convenient that those who went up against the prototype and decided to leave the factory after he told everyone they couldn't, suddenly were found.
Oh, but wait, look at the date on this. It's issue 14, but published, I guess, in October of 03. Meaning this would still have been after the Hour of Joy.
Yeah, it's almost like the prototype was trying
years after the Hour of Joy. If the Hour of Joy was 1995, this is only 8 years later.
Control the narrative that those toys did escape, and now the prototype has to cover it up to stop anyone from getting any ideas of escaping. This fits really nicely into that chapter 3 quote I mentioned. Your presence was demanded 10 years ago and you didn't show up. These toys were expected to be there but didn't, and were instead focused on escape, which they might now feel guilty about. They didn't want to kill any humans, so to find out there may be some still alive, as well as all of the toys they left behind, that might be good motivation to return to the factory. It would also explain something I've not yet really talked about, the player's ability to survive. We have survived falls, train crashes, explosions, pretty much anything you can think of. If we're being honest, that doesn't feel like something a human should be able to do. But a living toy, yes, they...
Sorry, I just got jump scared. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Oh, sorry.
Still get injured, but as we've seen through characters like Huggy and Kissy, they are far more resilient.
I'm good.
It does raise the question of the grab pack and how much dexterity they'd physically have as a toy to be able to control it, but that would entirely depend on what toy they were made into. Maybe Playtime had a human-looking toy, who knows? But then... any toys made before the Hour of Joy weren't workers in the factory. I mean, technically they were. Most of them were given certain jobs in the factory, but they didn't deserve to die for their actions.
But you worked here. So if anyone deserves to die alone, it's you.
It's only after the prototype
Boxy
takes
Boo.
over that he turns some of the former employees into toys. Mummy also says the toys are going to eat you if you fail in the games, which, yes, they could eat fellow toys, but
They
there are plenty
kinda
of other
do.
toys around. If you're human, however, your meat would be fresh.
Gonna actually say yes, they do, because in Chapter 5 we see a few of the Nightmare Crittles, I think, chewing on the innards from a big brawn who is being fed other human bits to regenerate and heal up so they can eat. As they even said, when brawn eats, they eat.
It would be a good meal for them. One they'd be excited for. Finally, when we meet the prototype in Chapter 5, he says this.
You repaid me by bringing in an outsider.
We are considered an outsider. Could this be because we abandoned the prototype for the outside world? Possibly. But realistically, it's more likely because we were never part of the mission. A human, an employee, they were the enemy. They were outsiders that didn't belong in their better place. And with that, we're kind of running out of options at this point. Those last two felt like scraping the bottom of the barrel for possible answers, and even then, they just don't fit the bill. Who am I missing? I know there's someone who fits the description, but I just can't remember. You guys got any ideas? What? Can't hear you. Amanda didn't give me her fourth wall breaking powers. Maybe if you use your grab pack to power that subscribe button, I'll be able to hear you through the speakers. Give it a try. You've probably only got about 5 seconds before the algorithm gets annoyed at me for not
Dude, I'm
talking about the
subscribed.
film. 5, 4,
You can't hear
3,
me.
2, 1. Whew, thanks for that. I can hear so much more now. So, who was it? Oh, of course! Rich! How could I forget about
Rich.
him?
Kind of forgot about him myself. Alright.
Richard Lovitz. He has always been a fascinating character to me. Much like Stella, we'd
Wait, is this the guy that yelled about the whole being assigned to the Isle of Misfit Toys?
found
The recall
VHS tapes
center?
of him in every single chapter up until chapter 5. He was a disgruntled employee that got demoted for bad-mouthing Playtime code to his colleague Avery. But after being taken under the wing of the head of shipping, he began to clean up his act, get control of his temper, and eventually was promoted to the head of shipping himself. He became a real man of the people, looking after his employees, helping the younger ones who struggled with the same things he did.
There are smarter ways to go about what you did.
He
Yeah,
even
it is
showed up
him.
again in the Fortnite collab with notes between him and Avery burying the hatchet, with Avery trying to confirm that he didn't rat out Rich, and Rich continuing to look out for his old colleague and friend. Frankly, his journey has been a nice ray of sunshine amidst the darkness that is the Playtime Go experiment.
Truly it
so
is.
the reason we're being shown this is wholly unclear. It doesn't really play a part in the lore. It's a side story about a random dude unrelated to everything that was, until chapter 5. In chapter 5, we don't get a VHS from Rich. It's actually the first time he's been absent in this entire franchise.
Oh, yeah.
But he is mentioned in an audio log between Leith and Eddie.
I think Mr. Lovitz is due for a promotion.
You're serious?
Oh, he can't be the people's champion if he's one of us.
Rich really was a man of the people, and that was causing Playtime Co. issues, so they decided to promote him to the executive level. This would cause people to abandon him thinking he was a sellout, but it would also have an unexpected consequence that ties in perfectly with our player character. This audio log is the same one where Eddie mentions he's heading to the theme park next week, so this is early August 1995, which would mean Rich's promotion would have happened after Harley's transformation into a walking version of ChatGPT for the other scientists to use in 1993. Therefore, Harley wouldn't have had any executive meetings with Rich to know who he is. And given his greater than thou
That makes
attitude,
sense.
I also wouldn't be surprised if the two never interacted while Harley was still human, simply because Rich was just a lowly shipment worker. Even if Rich was the head of a department, anyone that wasn't working in the labs would have been seen as beneath Harley. But that's not all the timing helps prove. It might explain how he could have missed the hour of joy.
Go on.
Bear with
Please
me.
explain.
This is going to get a little more on the speculative side, but narratively I do think it really makes sense. This situation in my mind goes one of two ways. With this discussion being only a week before the hour of joy, maybe Leith thinks about Eddie's
Only a
idea
week
for a bit,
before,
but
huh?
then eventually heads over to Rich and offers him the job. It's a big deal, a new parking spot, a new car, big salary bump, but what would his subordinates think? Leith would likely be able to see the hesitancy, but he needed Rich to take the deal. So, hey, look, take tomorrow off. Think about it and let me know. Only for tomorrow to be the day
Hour
everyone was
of
killed.
joy,
This would
yes.
lead to Rich feeling incredibly guilty about his people. He should have been there for them, but he wasn't. And so when he hears there's some people left in
I like this theory. This is a good
the
one.
factory, he has to go and see. The only issue
For my
is
people.
the player's guilt seems to be tied to the experiments in some way, which at this point Rich wouldn't know about. So this is my alternative alternative suggestion. Leith doesn't think too much about Eddie's suggestion. It's Eddie, he trusts him, and so Rich gets his promotion the week before the Hour of Joy. Rich is not as calculated as Leith, and so doesn't see the downsides of getting all this extra stuff. He takes the job, and as one of the new executives, is given top-level access to everything.
And learns
so
about
begins
everything.
his tour of the real Playtime Co. He is informed of everything Leith, Eddie, and Stella have been doing, how they've been experimenting.
I can imagine suddenly gaining all this knowledge, flipping through the pad, be like, oh my god, we're monsters.
Experimenting on turning orphans into toys, just like their founder, Elliot Ludwig, did years ago, creating Poppy and the prototype. We know Rich has a big heart. He cares about the orphans.
I get it. It's a nice program and all, on brand. Don't you think these kids deserve some real sunlight instead of floodlights and painted skies?
So, when he realizes what's been going on, he can't stomach it. But he's already signed up. He's stuck. Maybe after learning all of this, he takes a sick day. Maybe he tries to quit. Or maybe Leith tells him to take the day to celebrate his promotion. Either way, he misses the Hour of Joy. This would mean he's not only feeling guilty about all the employees he left behind, but for the children that suffered because of the company he'd been working for this entire time. The prototype, however, wouldn't have seen Rich as any different from any of the others. He was an executive. He was just as responsible for the experiments as anyone else.
Right.
So, with Stella on side, he ensured that the ones responsible for these atrocities got their comeuppance. Maybe the prototype called an executive meeting for Leith, Eddie, Stella, and Rich. However, Rich never showed up. He missed the meeting, and therefore the party that led to the death of his colleagues, only for a note to appear years later telling him that the employees were still alive. And being the people's champion that he was,
this
he
I
knew
could
that if there
definitely
was
see.
any chance they were still alive, he had to take it. He knew the factory inside and out. He practically worked in every department at this point, and he
Pretty
knew
much.
of the horrors that awaited him, which is why we never seem to react scared or shocked whenever we come face to face with these monsters, even our biggest hater.
You.
The outsider. Butcher, they call you.
Based on what we have, I think Rich is our best possible option for who the player character is. Of course, there's always a chance Mob pulls a fast one on us and brings some random character we've never heard of before. It wouldn't be the first time, but hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
Alright everyone, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of you next time when we flick back on. Until then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.